So today I'm going to be reading some extracts of Jim Woodford, a gentleman who used to be an atheist. He spent most of his life as an atheist, and he had a very rare disease which caused him to die for a short period of time, several years ago, probably around maybe 15 years ago now. And he wrote a book about his experience, which is called Heaven, the Unexpected Journey. And I'm going to read a little bit of chapter 4 because he talks about encountering beings and he tells quite an interesting story. But just before we start this, the context of this current story is that he's left his body, he finds himself in a realm of darkness with an evil entity that he's encountered that is kind of trying to draw him into what he describes as a kind of hellish realm of some kind. It was dark, it was cold, it smelled horrible, and there was kind of like a monster that was trying to draw him into this realm. So this is the context, and at this point he calls out for help, and this is what happens. So this is chapter 4 of this book, and I hope you enjoy it. This chapter is entitled The Face of Angels. Okay? As I watched three lights converging on my position at tremendous speed, a new concern occurred to me based on my long acquired piloting instincts. I forgot to say he was a pilot. So he was very, very used to flying planes. I began to be concerned that the lights might need to put on some flap to slow down for a safe and proper landing. Just habit, I guess. As the three lights began to take on form, I realized that they were more than points of light coming out of the distance. These lights were not some kind of UFO. They were angels. I watched in wonder as they came to a soft and perfect touchdown right in front of me. Before me stood three indescribably beautiful creatures. If I could only paint what my mind eye saw, the creatures displayed brilliant colors beyond the palette of any artist's ability to reproduce. How can I explain these indescribable beings? Earthly words fail me. The three angels glided towards me, making no sound of any kind, though their movement created a ripple wake illuminated with a pure light. The angels were not all identical. Each one was slightly different from the other. The first angel, closest to me, was about 10 feet tall. I was taken by the beauty of his face and the regal bearing of his general kind of countenance. His features were perfect, and his face gleamed with the love of God. The second angel was about 12 feet tall. This angel caused me to open my eyes even wider in awe. He, like the first, was clothed in a simple garment woven more of light than fabric. So it was kind of a glowing garment that he saw. Now the other two moved aside, and a third angel kind of appeared and stood before him. This third angel is around 15 feet tall. So that's like 3 times the size of the average person. This third angel was dressed somewhat differently than the other two who preceded him. Note, this angel was dressed differently. This one was clearly in command, holding a greater authority. So the third angel was the leader or the commander from his perspective. These three were magnificent angels, glorious representatives of the light and love of heaven, according to his perspective. In that moment, I knew that God had heard my plea, God help me, because when he was in danger, he called out that God help me, and then he saw these lights shining and converging towards him. So he says, in that moment I knew that God had heard my plea, God help me. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed with awe and gratitude on the soft green grass of heaven. The heavenly light rippled along the ground under my bent knees, flowing towards and bending with the brilliant light of the three angels before me. The heavenly light rippled along the ground under my bent knees, flowing towards and blending with the brilliant light of the three angels before me. While much of their appearance was similar to what we recognize about angels, there were also many facets that I will try to describe. Imagine a face that is neither male nor female, that carries the best of both genders. Faces most incredibly regal and majestic, with very light, brilliant hair and a luminescence of holiness shining from within the very light of God. They were dressed in the most elegant white robes. I use the color white to describe their faces, hair, and robes, but it was more than a color. It was a fullness of glory that has nothing to do with color. Color is an inadequate term to describe the appearance of these beings wrapped in radiating brilliance. Now the three angels moved and began to glide towards me. I stood to my feet and instinctively I reached out my hands as if to touch the reality of their presence. As I reached out, the smallest angel came around beside me. Small is a relative term. He was 10 feet tall. As I marveled at this brilliant and shining being so close to me, he reached back to place his hand on my arm as if to reassure and connect with me. His hand rested lightly but warmly upon my forearm for a moment. And then he spoke to me without a word. And then he spoke without words to my heart, saying, "Fear not, James. We are your constant friends." This was no chance encounter with three angels whose turn came up in the angel rotation that day. I now understood that they had been assigned to me since my birth. The touch of the angel's hands on my arm sent a warm feeling of assurance and comfort through me, body, soul, and spirit. And as his arm encircled my shoulder, so he was like this now, I felt as though I was being hugged by 50 grandmothers simultaneously with a hint of tapioca. It reminded me of the comfort I felt as a small boy coming in the door of my grandparents' house on a cold winter's day to be greeted by my mother and grandmother with that warm, comforting smell of tapioca pudding. It was such a warm and comforting thought that God, who we called out upon for mercy, in his infinite care and compassion, knew that my first glimpse and experience of heaven would be so overwhelming that he put before me things that I had loved as a child to calm my heart. Heaven was beginning to feel more familiar, like home, to me. The angels I experienced didn't have wings with feathers in the way artists may have portrayed them in paintings. Rather, I saw that they had two spires of golden light coming up from the back of their shoulders that radiated a light, making their heads shine. This created an effect above their heads resembling a halo. What we see as a halo is the radiance of the spires of their wings of golden light, creating an arc of gold above their bodies. Perhaps the most astounding aspect of the appearance of all three of these angels was their eyes. They were the deepest violet, a blend of colors describable and indescribable, colors of both heaven and earth. These eyes conveyed a regal calm that was as deep in love and compassion as they were in color, moving me to feel as though I was the only person who had ever been born. And these wondrous eyes never blinked. So this is entitled The Warrior Angel. There was among these three impressive beings one who literally stood head and shoulders above the other two. As I mentioned earlier, he stood about 15 feet tall, with garments that were slightly different. He was not only larger, but clearly had a commanding presence, more gravitas. His garments were more distinct and regal. His garments were more distinct and regal than the other two. He looked more majestic. And as he moved towards me, the light of his robe rippled like moonlight on water. The other two angels deferred to him, bowing slightly and moving out of the way as he approached. His apparel was subtly different in that his garment was brighter than that of the other two. The hem on the sleeves of his garment was also gold, with threads of purple running through it, embroidered with intricate and beautiful detail. So they're wearing very beautiful clothing. Upon his garment and over his shoulders was a sash of gold and a belt of the same color around the middle of the garment. There were a few notable details that set him apart as the one in charge. This one wore a scabbard at his side, which is kind of like a sword holder. I cannot say that I saw a sword in the manner that we might expect in a scabbard, but there was what appeared to be an instrument or weapon composed of purest bright. There was what appeared to be an instrument or weapon composed of purest, brightest light. Then he makes a reference to possibly being like a lightsaber of some kind. The form of the scabbard weapon was beyond my experience and ability to describe. The best I could offer was that it was a sword of light. He had a medallion around his neck, and I later learned that it was a gorget, and was shaped like a crescent moon laid horizontal. It's just like it's a piece of armor that goes around your neck to defend you from being stabbed in the throat. This was a piece of battle armor such as warriors would wear in ancient times to protect the throat area. This piece was engraved with letters of some kind of other language that I couldn't decipher, but the markings appeared to shimmer as if alive. This commanding angel had come prepared to do battle with the darkness that had threatened me, and he had won. The warrior angel approached me, and I felt dwarfed by his physical stature as he looked downward toward me. All at once, to my great astonishment, the angel deferred to by one of the other. All at once, to my great astonishment, the 15-foot angel, the commander angel, who was deferred to by the other two, now bowed to me. To me. How could this be? I esteem myself as the lowest of the low, a mere lowly man. I was not a holy man of God, who had spent 1 minute pursuing him or even giving him the time of day. So he's saying he was unrighteous, he was an atheist. How could an angelic being of this glorious bow down to him out of respect? I cannot accurately portray my feelings at this moment suspended in eternity. This amazing being filled with the light and perfections of God bowed to me. Who am I? I felt quite small by comparison to the immense stature of the warrior angel. Then he began to speak, not as you and I might speak. His mouth didn't move, nor was there an audible voice. Rather, there was a communication or thought transference of spirit to spirit. So it was mind-to-mind communication. He didn't speak. I knew what this angel was saying as his thoughts entered my mind. The communication was on a deeper level than earthly audible words can express. His communication surpassed mere language, as if coming from someone who knew me very well. It was not unlike the connection some married couples experience after years of being together, who know each other so well that one hears the heart of the other person and might even finish their sentences. Yet the spiritual tone of this innate voice was both rhythmic and calming. His thoughts resonated in me. Oh, damn, my buddy. No, I'm still good. His thoughts resonated in me. His communication seemed to be formed simply, yet with a kind of Victorian propriety or geniality. With my heart becoming settled in the presence of this heavenly encounter, a question arose from my own heart. I asked the angel, "How could you bow to me? You who live here in this place in the presence of God." What I heard next humbled me beyond description. "James," he said, "man was created by the very breath of God. The light of God's essence is in you. The light becomes tarnished with sin and turning away from God, but the light is still in you and all of mankind. When we bow to you, we are honoring the light of God that is in you." I began to understand that these powerful, majestic beings were in awe of us, of mortal man. The same light that lit up the garden of heaven and that filled the angels was in me. What moved the angel to bow to me was not anything about me. It was the light of God that exists in me. The hosts of heaven are in awe of us, mortal man, human beings. We are precious and unique beyond our mortal comprehension. Everything around me in heaven was filled with light, from angels to flowers and even the grass on which I stood. The question, "Who am I?" was being answered in a most unexpected way. I am simply one who God heard crying out for forgiveness and help. I am one for whom God banished the darkness back into the pit of hell. I had not seen a small fraction of the wonders I would be shown, each one more amazing than the last. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was chapter 4 of Jim Woodford's book, Heaven, An Unexpected Journey. I'm going to read a little bit more of this book because it's really exciting and it kind of captures his experience. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I will speak to you and I will see you shortly.